Hey friends, Patrick here, and it is getting exciting. Release candidate 1 of .NET 8 is here. And if you don't want to feel like this guy here regarding the new Blazor Web App Template, then I recommend just continue watching, because this is what we're going to have a look at today, the new Blazor Web App Template. And now everything is available: server render mode, WebAssembly render mode, and server-side rendering and stream rendering. So we will just compare the whole modes from the template. So just continue watching, and then you will know by the end of this video what you have to do for your dream project maybe. And one more thing, I'm currently creating a new .NET 8 Web Dev Jumpstart course, which will be available for free. And if you want to be the first to know when this thing is available, then just check out the link in the video description, and I will send you the link when this thing is there. You will be the first to know. Promise. One more thing. Thank you so much for watching already. And if you liked this tutorial and learned something, I'd really appreciate it, guys, if you hit the like button, subscribe to my channel. It does make a difference. Thank you so much. And thank you so much to all my patrons for supporting me. And if you want to support me too, I will love you forever. The link again in the video description. And now let's start with the tutorial. All right, now before we start with .NET 8, let's go one step back and have a quick look at the .NET 7 templates or the template projects, solutions, you name it. Now here you see the Blazor Server solution with .NET 7, and I also opened or created the WebAssembly and the WebAssembly ASP.NET core hosted version, and this one will be really interesting, but more about that in a minute. So you see server here. I think you know that, right? You have the shared folder, you have your pages folder, data folder for your forecast service, the example service here. You're not really getting data from a database or anything, or any web service even. This is then done in WebAssembly, but this is how it looks. You've got your host, CS, HTML. This is different than in .NET 8 now. And in general, you will see that the folder structure is different, the naming is different, and also the files have changed. But before we have a look at .NET 8 now, let's have a quick look at .NET 7 WebAssembly as well. There it is. So here now you see we've got also our pages folder. Now here's the fetch data for the example of fetching data, and here we are really making, well, it looks like a web service call, but in the end it's just a JSON file we are getting, right? So here is the sample data, but this is how it would work, right? An HTTP call to a web API, for instance. We've got our index razor, so this is already different to the Blazor Server project. There you've got your host, and here's the index razor. Again, name is different now in .NET 8. And the, for me, most interesting, well, solution with .NET 7 was this one here, right? When you create a new project and you check ASP.NET Core hosted, because with that you get one solution, and when you deploy this thing, you only need one Azure Web App, for instance, if you're deploying this to Azure in the cloud, and you've got your client, which are then all the pages, the components, all that stuff. You've got your server, which is in essence a web API, right? You see also the example controller, and here now we're really making a web service call. See it here, HTTP get from JSON async, then weather forecast. This is the controller name. Base URL is the same for client and server, and this is why it works. You have no CORS issue, nothing like that. Beautiful stuff. And then also the shared folder where client and server can share the entities here, like this model here, the weather forecast. So again, I think beautiful stuff. I think this is something that many developers used, web developers used, and this is something we are currently somehow missing. You can build it yourself for now with release candidate 1 in .NET 8 using the Blazor Web App Template. But Dan Roth said, I will link with the info card to the community stand-up. He said that this is coming back with release candidate 2. All right, so let's stay a bit patient here, and then we'll see. All right, so you've seen the files, you see the folder structure, the projects you get right? Here with server, Blazor Server, you only have the server project, WebAssembly, only the WebAssembly project, and with ASP.NET Core hosted, you've got the client, which is completely WebAssembly, no Blazor Server stuff here. Server here is actually a web API and then also a shared folder. Can be already a bit confusing, but it is getting even more confusing with .NET 8. For that, we need Visual Studio, see it here, the preview edition, version 17.8.0 preview 2 it is. And now, drum roll, we say I want to create a new project. And you see the new Blazor Web App Template. Well, it's not that new when you played around with the preview editions of .NET 8. But again, you can, as always, enter Blazor, for instance. And we still have the older, let's say, Blazor WebAssembly app and the Blazor Server app. In essence, the same stuff we've just seen with .NET 7. But now, and this is where Microsoft is heading, and I think wants us developers to go, is using this Blazor Web App Template. So let's have a look. Now it's gone. So Blazor again, and let's just use it. All right, let's call this Blazor Server.NET 8 because this is what I want to show you first. We hit next, and now it's getting interesting because we have these checkboxes here. Configure for HTTPS. I think this is standard. Not that interesting, but now this stuff here, use interactive WebAssembly components, use interactive server components, and include sample pages. I think this makes the most sense. Yeah, this is easiest to understand, I guess, because here now we just get sample data, example components, pages, similar to the weather forecast or the counter page, right? This is what we get when we check this. If you don't check this, then it is similar to the empty templates that we know from .NET 7. But now come these two. Use interactive server components and use interactive WebAssembly components. Now, what does this mean? With .NET 8, we get real server-side rendering. Now, what do I mean with real server-side rendering? We do not have by default a WebSocket connection, but with .NET 7, we had a WebSocket connection by default when you created a Blazor server application. Now here, when you check use interactive server components, you also get this WebSocket connection. Let's just create this thing already. Real quick, I'm currently creating a .NET 8 Web Dev Jumpstart course, which will be available for free. We're going to have a look at web APIs and entity framework there, for instance. And if you want to be the first to know when this thing is available, then I recommend just check out the link in the video description and I will send you an email when you can get it. So scroll a bit further down and then you know what to do. And now let's continue with the tutorial. Sorry that you have to be that patient today, but I am really trying to explain that so that everyone gets it, because also for me it is still somehow not 100% clear what's going on there. But here now, what you get, first of all, you see that the folder structure is different. You've got your root folder, nice. But where are all the other files? Well, here in the components folder. So they moved everything into the components folder. I think this is more streamlined, really. I like it. You've got your app eraser file, imports eraser. You've got the pages. Now, instead of index, we've got the home eraser. And here under layout, we've got, instead of the shared folder, now there's this layout folder for the main layout and also the nav menu. I think this is clear. So shared folder is gone. If you've got components that you want to use in several pages, then you can still create a shared folder, of course, but you can also just put them here under components. And then regarding the pages folder, these are the, well, components that have a route in here, right? And you can already see here, we've got these new render modes. So render mode server, this is happening when you create a Blazor server app or using the web app template and say, I want to have interactive server components. This now means that this whole component here, this page is rendered on the server. You get static data to the client. It will be returned to your client when you want to access this page. But with that, you also activate interactivity. This means when you click the button of this counter here, then something is happening. You see a result, but this is only possible thanks to a WebSocket connection. If we would comment this out, and I will do this in a minute, then this thing would not be interactive. All right. Then you've got the home page, nothing interesting. Well, it's a bit, is it a bit smaller or less content? I'm not sure about that, but still nothing really changed there instead of the file name maybe. And then weather, this is not the name instead of the fetch data component. And here you see this beautiful new streaming rendering or stream rendering attribute. This just means, and this again is the real server-side rendering. Server-side rendering in essence just means, they also called it in the community stand-up the static server rendering. So you get static files from the server. And when you, for instance, here want to get some data and they just simulate the delay here, when you want to get some data, then you have to wait for the server to finish calculating or getting the data, and then it returns the static data again, the static file again to the client. But here now with stream rendering, the big advantage is that you see, let's say, the shell of this page, and when loading the data is done, then it will just fit the data where it belongs. All right. And this is the great thing then of server-side rendering combined with stream rendering. But interactive server-side rendering then is this stuff here. All right, you have a button, you click a button, and you see that something is happening there. Let's just run this finally, and we hopefully see how it works. All right, there we are. By the way, I opened this blog post here. You should definitely read this because Dan Roth here explains everything really nice, really good. And also please watch the community stand-up. By the way, I find it funny that with Preview 7, we've got HTTP 3 by default. This is now disabled. So you have no dialog where you have to click, yes, I accept this. Anyways, here you can see what changed, right? The web app template updates, some stuff for the quick grid, the .NET WebAssembly runtime, additional assemblies. We can have a look at that later. And yeah, lots and lots of interesting stuff. Let's just check it out by yourself. So here we've got Hello World. And now let's open the console real quick. And here now in the network tab, we see WebSocket connection. So now when I go to counter, we see this WebSocket connection is here. I can click there and I also see that something is happening. Now let's try this out without the render mode. So I just comment this out and restart the application. And when I now click here, nothing is happening, right? And we also see, I know these are WebSocket connections, but this is not the WebSocket connection you're looking for. This is some tooling stuff, I think, from Visual Studio, for instance, but not the WebSocket connection we need for the interactivity. So this is what you really need if you want interactivity like this button and something is happening here. You see that this is the WebSocket connection. And when you go to messages, you see that something is happening here when I click on this. All right, so this now already, this is the difference between server-side rendering and interactive server-side rendering, maybe static server-side rendering or static server rendering. I know it is confusing still. All right, next would be streaming rendering. And this is now the weather forecast page here. When we again go maybe here to the network tab and go to all. All right, and go to the weather page. You've seen it, right? Loading, and then the data is here. And when we have a look at the result, nothing here yet. Let me just do this one more time. Or let's just refresh this thing. Okay, this is what I was looking for. We see the, I called it shell, right? So the side, the static side without any data, but it is making somehow on the server a web service call or grabs the data from anywhere. We don't see it here, of course, because our client is not making a web service call. It is done by the server in the server world. And when the data is there, then we see that it is just added to this page, right? The DOM is manipulated, so it feels like a real single page application, a SPA. One more time, loading, right? So half a second and then we see the data. But now when I disable the stream rendering, Let's just save this and restart the application. Saw that. It takes some time. I don't see the loading. And then when the data is there, and we also see it here, we can access the page, or the page is loaded, right? So it doesn't react directly when I click. Right? I'm clicking now and it takes half a second and then it is loading. And this is different now with the stream rendering. And again, these are already, well, lots of changes actually with the new Blazor actually in .NET 8, right? I click 1, 2, 3 and now, and it is changing the page, but the data is coming a bit later, all right? That's everything in essence regarding server-side stuff. If you have questions, please drop them in the comment section. Now let's have a look at WebAssembly. So let me just stop the application first. Terminal, stopping it. And now let's just create a new project. Not that, really a new project. Really sorry if you hear the cars outside. I had to open the window because it's really hot in here. And now Blazor Web App Template, and here let's say Blazor WebAssembly.NET 8. We hit next, and now instead of interactive server components, I choose interactive WebAssembly components. And this is now really interesting because with Preview 7 we did not have this. We had to add this manually, and as you can see now we've got 2 projects. Maybe with .NET 9 Microsoft will combine these and we will only have 1 project, but for now we've got 2 server projects still, all right? So we still have the components here, layouts, pages, and so on, and a client project now where we also have components. And here in the example, we've got a page, which is again the counter page, which is also a component, of course. And here now we see RenderMode WebAssembly. So what does that mean? Well, this means that the WebAssembly files will be downloaded as you're used to it when you're using or creating, developing Blazor WebAssembly applications, all right? And what's also new here, and you will see that as well when you watch the community stand-up, but it's almost 2 hours, so maybe it's for you, it's enough to just see this summary here somehow. It says that in RC1, they haven't implemented this add additional assemblies method, but that's not true. As Dan Roth said in the community stand-up, they actually support them or support this method, but they haven't updated the template. So there was this idea that for each component or every component that you see here on the client with WebAssembly or using WebAssembly, that you would also have to have a component or a page on the server that is just calling this component here. But this is not true. What we can actually do is we can copy that, put this here. And by the way, additionally to the cars outside, maybe you hear my baby girl. Sorry about that. Anyways, we see the page directive, and we can actually delete this whole file. So remove that. And now here in the program CS, not that one from the server project, we see the services, the new services, add Razor components and add WebAssembly components. And also here, map Razor components, add WebAssembly render mode. And here now we can also call or add the method add additional assemblies with the assembly of, from the client pages, counter assembly. Only need the assembly. Don't, again, get confused here. You don't have to do this for each component or each page. We just need the assembly. And this is just an easy way to get the assembly. And this should now hopefully work. So again, still the components folder on the server side. We've got the layouts, we've got the pages here, imports, app Razor, and so on. New also haven't talked about that, but let's just wait a little until we combine these two, and then I will talk a little bit about the app Razor and the routes component here. And then on the client, we only have actually the counter razor, also the imports. Yep, programs, yes, not a lot going on here. And also root, but here we only have the app settings. All right, so that's pretty much it. Let's run this thing and let's see how this looks in the end. All right, so again, let's open the console here. And now interesting part would be the WASM tab, because weather is still the same, right? Let's have a quick look again. We see stream rendering. This is the same server-side rendering with stream rendering example, but now regarding the counter, you see it's downloading a whole lot of stuff. And here, this is the main important, or the main thing, I guess, .NET Native, renamed from .NET WASM to .NET Native WASM, and all the other stuff that seems to be relevant. But if you want to have more explanations about that, then please, again, watch the community stand-up. So anyways, here you see that now we're actually downloading something, and here you see it as well in the console, loaded 7 megabytes resources. Of course, if you publish this, this will be significantly smaller. And when we now click this thing, it is interactive. Isn't that nice? So this is now the big difference already between the server, the Blazor Server Web App, and the Blazor WebAssembly Web App, or let's say the Blazor Web App Template, using server-side interactivity and WebAssembly interactivity. So for me, it just means that whenever you want to use WebAssembly, you still have your server project there, right? And you just add the WebAssembly components, which is actually pretty nice. When I think about there's so many use cases for that, but let's think about a typical blog, for instance, right? You want to build your own portfolio page, your blog, or something with Blazor now with .NET 8. So you use the Blazor server magic here to, for instance, display your blog posts, your articles. This can be static stuff that you give the client to read, all right? And this is actually then also really good for SEO, search engine optimization, right? But then again, if you want to have an administration side, an admin backend, let's say, where you then create your articles, then you could still use the interactivity of Blazor Server, or you say, no, I want to have a smoother experience. If you see the milliseconds, because you're probably the only user that is using this application. But anyways, you can say, okay, for the edit form that you're then using, and I don't know, uploading images, whatever it is, setting tags, then you could say, okay, I'm using WebAssembly and create my admin pages or admin components there for WebAssembly, and then combine this, all right? So this is just one example, and I can think of many, many, many where this really makes a lot of sense, and I think this is awesome. This is really, really awesome. All right, but now let's continue with the combination of both. So we create another project, Blazor Web App it is, and now let's just say Blazor.net 8, and yeah, let's just call it that, because now what I want to do is I use WebAssembly and the interactive server components, and the only thing then, okay, I already got something that is called that, so let's just say server and WASM. What a great name. And here now we check both WebAssembly and server. And here now the exciting part is that, again, we get 2 projects, but the thing is that here now on this thing, we get render mode auto. Again, and I guess this will change then in RC2 with the template, we can grab the page directive, put it up here, and then remove the counter page on the server side. All right, this took long. And here now in the programs, yes, now here we see add server components and add WebAssembly components, and also add server render mode, add WebAssembly render mode. And again, we add additional assemblies, type of counter. And is this the client one? Yeah, has to remove the other one, right? And then the assembly. All right. And with that, then what is happening is that when we access this page for the very first time, we will use a WebSocket connection to load this really fast, all right? And then we've got the server side interactivity. But when we access this page a second time, for instance, it is not switching while we are still on that page, right? It is switching as soon as we reload this thing, for instance. Then it is using WebAssembly because the WebAssembly files are being downloaded in the background. So it's all optimized for performance and speed so that the user doesn't have to wait that damn long to get the counter button, all right? So one more time, we are here in the console. We go to the network, is it there? The network tab. First, WebSocket. All right, so here we go to the counter page and we see our WebSocket connection. WASM downloaded in the background, all right? I go here, go to messages, I click this thing and we see that something is happening here, all right? And we see, actually, can we see them? Well, sometimes you see the coordinates of the mouse click. Well, not in this case. Yeah, here you see it, right? So this is then transferred to the server. The server knows, okay, the user clicked this button. I have to update this thing. Everything happening in milliseconds, of course. But now, drum roll again. And I hope it works. Let's just refresh. And it's already done. It's really fast, right? So, okay, it's locally as well. But anyways, you haven't seen a loading screen, right? Meaning in the beginning, maybe you remember with .NET 7 when you created a Blazor WebAssembly project and you first see this loading circle, right? Not happening here, never. So you see the page has been loaded. These WebSocket connections again are some tooling stuff from Visual Studio. And here now WASM already downloaded, right? We already have it. So now it is actually using the client, the WebAssembly interactivity. Isn't that nice? So this is what it's all about in release candidate 1. The next big step for me really is, again, ASP.NET Core hosted, because you can build it yourself, but you know, maybe you're as lazy as I am, and that it would be really nice if we just have an ASP.NET Core hosted model again with WebAssembly. The web API is already there. Of course, since this is already running on the server, we could just create our services here, our repositories that access Entity Framework, but then it's coupled and I don't want that. I want to have a separate web API, but the base address maybe should be the same. I want to deploy everything to one Azure Web App, so I'm, well, saving the costs, right? Otherwise I would have to use one deployment for the web API and another one for the client here. I've got CORS issues, stuff like that, and I don't want that. So this is something I'm really excited about. Please tell me, what are you excited about? What are your questions? Would be really interesting to get to know, yeah, what you're interested in. One more thing still I wanted to show you is this new routes component. So they changed the main pages here, let's say the app Blazor. Here now there is a routes component, and the reason for that is, in essence, that could be the case that you want that also to be rendered as or you want to use the RenderMode WebAssembly here, and to be able to do that, now they had to extract that in a single component, and here now you can use the new render mode attribute and say this is now at render mode and then WebAssembly, for instance. And in this case, then this will also use the WebAssembly render mode. So this is one reason. There are more, for instance, the not found is not there anymore. Again, for more details, please check out the community stand-up. But this is one of the reasons. And one more thing I want to show you what McKinnon talked about in the community stand-up. Really like that. One example, when you, for instance, want to change the page title here, all right? And in the page title, you also want to have a look at the current count. Let's just test that and remove that maybe, because we do not really need that. And we just restart the application. Restarting here, we see counter 0. I click this thing, doesn't really work. Well, why is that? Now the head layout, you can also make this interactive, because by default it isn't. It's just static server-side rendering. And here now, because the page title is part of the head layout, head outlet, which is now also using the new sections feature of Blazor in .NET 8, made a video about that. So here now we can also say render mode is now render mode server, for instance. Let's test that. What's happening here? Click this, not working, right? But when I now say WebAssembly, we see the counter here. I can click this thing and now it is changing. All right. So now whenever I click this button, the current count changes, and I can also say, okay, I want to see that in the page title, but I still have to make the, where was it here? The, there it was, the head outlet interactive as well. And as you've seen, I have to, seems that way, have to use the same render mode as the one that I'm using here. All right. Okay. So I think this is enough for this more or less short summary of the new Blazor Web App Template in RC1 of .NET 8. Took now half an hour. Let's see how long it is after I edit this thing. Again, if you have questions, if you want to see certain stuff I make a tutorial about maybe, then please tell me that in the comments. Otherwise, guys, thank you so much for watching. If you like this tutorial here, please hit the like button, smash it. If you want to subscribe to my channel, it does make a difference. Thank you so much. And again, thank you so much to all my patrons for your support. I love every single one of you. And apart from that, again, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Take care.